GameOveranalyzer.
So I got the Might and Magic Platinum Edition as a kid, which contains Might and Magic 6 through 9. And although I didn't quite understand what kind of games they were at the time, all I knew is I loved RPGs, and this looked like a fun RPG to dive into. And lo and behold, the series actually won my heart over, and to this day, I still think it's a really fun and interesting series. But Might and Magic 7 is the one that wound up standing out to me the most, and the one I've replayed the most often. So today I'd like to talk about the game and hopefully excite you guys about it as well. Hi, my name is Mana. Welcome to GameOveranalyzer, a channel where I talk entirely too much about video games. I have a huge passion for RPGs and horror games, and an even bigger passion for not shutting up about it. So this is a brand new channel. Hopefully you guys enjoy your stay here, and I will entertain you as best as I can. So when I usually mention Might and Magic series, most people think about the heroes of Might and Magic games, which are a spin-off of the mainline Might and Magic titles, which I can't fault them for. The heroes titles wound up becoming much more popular with time and have aged much better. However, I think the mainline series still has a lot of interesting things to offer and are fairly overrated for something that the spin-off series is somehow more popular than, which is an interesting case. It would be like if Final Fantasy Tactics completely overcame the mainline Final Fantasy game's popularity. It would be a weird situation. Some of it's understandable, as the mainline series does feel a bit under budgeted and tends to be very much overshadowed by contemporary RPGs of that same period. However, I still think they're a bit underrated. So we'll give it a bit of a retrospective. A retrospective, if you will. Released in 1999, Might and Magic 7 for Blood and Honor was developed by New World Computing and published by 3DO. It built upon its predecessor, Might and Magic 6, The Mandate of Heaven, which was a then modernized version of the older Might and Magic 1 through 5 games. The Might and Magic series started as a legally distinct Dungeons & Dragons clone with Might and Magic Book 1, The Secret of Inner Sanctum, which played similarly to the likes of the 1985 game Bard's Tale, released just 1 year before Might and Magic. Might and Magic 1 was released to critical success and was praised for its open world and large scope. The Might and Magic universe is basically another fantasy kitchen sink, similar to that of Warcraft and Dungeons & Dragons, so you have a wide variety of Tolkien-esque races and mythological creatures. As the years ticked on, New World Computing eventually decided to move past its older era games and upgrade to something a bit more current. They started with Might and Magic 6, released in 1998, which, while not considered a huge hit, was more than successful enough to spawn more entries into the series. On top of New World Computing's success with Heroes of Might and Magic 3, spin-off of the mainline Might and Magic games, it's unsurprising the series continued to thrive despite not necessarily keeping pace graphically with some of its contemporaries. In fact, Might and Magic 7 was nominated for both Computer Game Strategy Plus and Computer Game World's 1999 Role-Playing Game of the Year, and lost both times to Planescape Torment, with other notable nominees including Nethergate and one of my all-time favorite games, System Shock 2. The game's reviews criticize its hack-and-slash nature and lack of story focus compared to other narrative-driven RPGs of the time such as Fallout. The controls were considered subpar due to no mouse support, despite this being considered a staple since the like of Daggerfall, and the graphics were considered dated for its time. Despite all that, it's considered an improvement over Might and Magic 6's engine. The late 90s was a time where a lot of games were taking chances and trying to evolve their respective genre, and unfortunately Might and Magic 7 was taking the safer route, and it didn't pay off. I wonder if it had come out in 1996 or 1997 if it would have been better received. Overall, the game does deliver an otherwise solid experience. It offers phenomenal replayability, combat is strangely addicting, and the dungeoneering is absolutely superb. My hope is to bring more attention to this gem, or at least raise awareness of its existence, because despite the criticisms, there really is a wonderful game at the heart of everything. Let's start with a brief history of the world. Might and Magic 1 through 5 take place elsewhere, but within the same universe as Might and Magic 6 through 8. The world, Enroth, has 3 continents: Antagarich, Jajaim, and Enroth, the last of which is a really weird choice because why would you name a continent after the planet? Imagine if we're like, oh yeah, this is the planet Earth. Here we have the continent of Antarctica, Africa, Europe, and Earth. Anyway, Might and Magic 6 encompasses Enroth, but Might and Magic 7 explores Antagarich. Antagarich first appeared in Heroes of Might and Magic 3 expansion Restoration of Arathia, which sets up some of the important figureheads seen in Might and Magic 7. And Techrich is divided into different territories and factions. The 4 big players are Arathia, the largest territory, which are mostly humans and led by Catherine Ironfist, a key figure in Heroes 3. Deja, an arid land filled with necromancers led by Archibald Ironfist, Catherine's brother-in-law. Avli, which encompasses the Elven territories led by Eldritch Parson. And Burkata, a desert of wizards led by Gavin Magus. There's a bunch of other smaller territories that we'll explore during the video, and a few that are only explored in other games, but I think that just about covers it for now. Let's create our party and jump in, and I can explain the plot more once we have more context. First, let's get started by creating a group. Sure, it's not Baldur's Gate 3, but we got plenty of options. We get to choose between humans, dwarves, elves, and orcs. I mean goblins. Orc-shaped goblins. We also get to choose their voices, which is extremely important because they can range from completely tolerable to extremely annoying.
Oh, it's just a cut, but I need it fixed, 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 but I...
After that, we can choose one of 9 classes, which is 3 more than Might and Magic 6. Now you haven't guessed it by the title, characters range from a spectrum of Might, that is martial combat, and Magic, which is spellcasters. So, quick breakdown of the classes. On the Might end, you have classes specializing in different weapons and armor categories, while on Magic end is divided between elemental magic, so think fire, water, air, earth, and self-magic, which is basically clerical spells, and encompasses body, spirit, and mind. There's also light and dark magic, we'll get into much later. Finally, we have miscellaneous skills like Merchant, which gives you better trade deals in stores, or Disarm Trap, which helps your parties remain physically intact while opening up trapped treasure chests, which is most of them. And Roth is very big on their security. Each skill can be increased by skill points, which you mostly get through leveling. So to go from a 1 to a 2 in a skill, you need 2 points, but from 10 to 11, you need 11 points. So the higher the skill, the harder it is to raise, and typically you won't see more than 1 or 2 skills raised above level 10. On top of all that, different classes can only go so far in each skill, so the progression is Basic, Expert, Master, and Grandmaster. The Thief can eventually Grandmaster Disarming Traps, which allows them a 100% chance to open a chest without the party having a case of the explosions. But an Archer can only increase it to Expert, which means they'll only have a double effectiveness for each skill point they put into Disarm Trap, which makes high-level traps really difficult for them to disarm. With all that said, you can see how complex putting a cohesive team winds up being. You have to ask yourself, do you want 4 spellcasters who are terrible in melee combat but can sling explosively destructive spells at anything that looks at you funny? Or would you rather have a well-balanced team that can handle everything and covers each other's weaknesses, but maybe not every member is well-suited for the front lines or spell slinging or whatever else you need? Let's quickly go over the classes. So the most might-heavy character is the Knight, which is a lot like D&D's Fighter. No magical powers whatsoever, but it's a great melee combatant and can grandmaster swords, spears, and plate armor. Next we have Cleric, who can grandmaster in self-magic spells and eventually either light or dark magic. They're also great at bartering and can wear chain, use shields, and wear maces, so they're pretty good in the front lines too. On the other end of the spectrum we have Sorcerer, who can grandmaster in any elemental spell, and eventually also light and dark magic, but they can't equip shields and only get low ranks in leather, making them the squishiest class by a mile. From there we have Monk, who specializes in unarmed combat and can eventually learn self-school magic, and can wind up becoming just as bulky as the warrior. Thief, who is great with daggers, leather armor, and can learn quite a few utility skills, ranging from being great at lockpicking and being the second best at item identification, and can eventually also learn how to use some expert level elemental magic. Paladin, who's basically a warrior fused with a cleric, that can grandmaster with maces, plate armor, and learn up to master self-magic. Archer, who is smack dab between sorcerer and warrior, they can master spear and grandmaster in the bow, hence Archer, and grandmaster chain armor, master all the elemental magic, and have a wide range of utility skills they can use. And then we have Druid, who can master rank in every spell school except for Light and Dark, and grandmaster alchemy, and is a little bit more durable than Sorcerer, but not by much. And finally we have Ranger, who can grandmaster Axe, expert in every spell school except Light and Dark, and encompasses Master of None. Now with all that covered, we'll form our very well balanced team of Warrior, Thief, Cleric, and Druid, which is pretty close to the default group of Warrior, Thief, Cleric, and Sorcerer. The variety of classes adds a lot of replayability to the game, and I love trying to use different class combinations, But for this particular playthrough, I want a smooth run that shows off a lot of the game, and that's what this group will do. For starting stats, we distribute from a shared stat pool, where we can help min-max stats. For instance, the Robin Hood doesn't need intelligence or personality to bash heads in, so we'll take those points out. But he does need to be strong and accurate. Races also matter, so goblins get higher strength and endurance at the cost of lower caster stats. Fanny, on the other hand, needs personality to increase her spell points as a self-magic caster, whereas Cherry Poppins needs both since she casts both elemental and self-magic. Finally, we select their other starting skills, which doesn't matter a ton but can influence starting gear and save us money early on having to teach them important skills. And with that, we're ready to jump into our very PG named party. Might and Magic 7's gameplay is basically identical to 6 and 8 and nearly identical to 9's. It essentially consists of free roaming through towns and finding dungeons with very little stopping the player from doing whatever they want in whatever order they want, so long as they can handle the enemies in that place. You can pick up quests, talk to townsfolk, fight monsters, find treasures, and explore some honestly spectacularly designed dungeons. Seriously, if Might and Magic as a series does anything right, it's dungeon design. You can get everything from caves to castles to burial tombs to labyrinths to haunted houses to absurdly spacious sewers, all packed with plenty of treasures, different themes, traps, and puzzles, and plenty of enemies. Combat is strangely addictive too. You can take on enemies in either turn-based or real-time modes, which you can seamlessly swap between. Your characters can run and gun with spells and arrows in real time, or take advantage of more tactical combat and turn-based. Although you fight with 4 people, there's no way to divide the group, and essentially wherever your camera is wherever your entire party is. Each character and enemy gets turns based on their speed and recovery rate based on their last move they used. So for instance, some spells have very long recovery rate, and getting more skills with weapons tend to reduce the character's recovery rate between attacks. In turn-based mode, enemies can move between turns, as can your party. So you can potentially utilize kiting strategies with spells and range attacks, or just run for the hills if you find yourself at a disadvantage. That said, a lot of the time you'll be mindlessly whacking at enemies and hoping you roll well enough to hit them while keeping up all your relevant buffs. Finding gear is another interesting aspect. Get these paper models that visually represent the gear you have on. By right-clicking the gear, you can see its relevant stats and enchantments. Gear is a progression system, and there's even unique and artifact gear with special properties. Enchantment on gear are typically randomized, so while you often find mundane gear, you'll occasionally find rings that give bonuses to certain stats or skills, or weapons that are enchanted to do elemental damage. There's quite a few types of gear too. You can equip a helmet, armor, boots, belt, gloves, necklace, up to 6 rings, a weapon, and, class and weapon depending, a shield. That's a lot of equipment choices to mix and match. Anyway, enough of the gameplay summary, let's hop into the game. Note that I'm playing with the Grayface mod, which changes the interface and allows the game to run full screen on modern systems. If you play this for yourself, I would highly suggest using it too. It also includes some bug fixes, but otherwise won't alter anything major. So the game starts out with a cutscene where some goblins were camping and caught unaware by a scouting party of elves. The goblins relay their side of the story to a man named Archibald. Much on him later, but remember the name. They're embellishing their story to sound better, but Archibald knows all too well his henchmen are giving him crap. At the same time, the elves are relaying their own tale to Gavin Magus, who comes off as honorable and good compared to Archibald's much more evil aesthetic. Both sides of the story end with the group witnessing what they perceive to be sea monsters coming from the ocean. And that's the most we'll hear about this part of the story for a little bit. When we start the game after making our party, we learn there's a scavenger hunt on the Emerald Isles, where Lord Markham is giving away the title of lordship over the lands of Harmondale to the winners.
Hear ye. The Emerald Island scavenger hunt is about to begin. The list of objects has been given to all contestants. As you know, the winners of the contest will be awarded title to Castle Harmony and the surrounding lands. Be careful. Emerald Island can be dangerous.
Naturally, our party becomes one of the scavenging groups, and we're thrust onto the tutorial islands. You even get a tutorial NPC who attempts to explain what each of the shops do. Paying a visit to
His Grace, Lord Markham, Duke of the Western Lowland,
reveals a list of scavenger items that we need, including a hat, a red potion, a seashell, a musical instrument, a floor tile, and a longbow. This seems like a pretty easy scavenger hunt if the reward is being granted title and lands, but whatever. We also find out there's some contestants who have gone missing and to be on the lookout for them. While wandering the town, we also find some shady guy named Malwick, who offers us a wand in exchange for a favor later. You can accept this and get a pretty strong wand for early in the game, but his associates do demand a favor much later in the game if accepted. I don't want to owe this creep anything, especially not with whatever facial hair he's rocking. Instead, I wander over to the highest part of the island and grab a pedestal that temporarily gives my characters a massive stat boost, which helps me clear out the dragonfly infestation plaguing the town. Despite being weak enemies, their sheer numbers manage to drive my party back, and I accidentally lure a few of them into town. The guards help out, but some of the townsfolk manage to become dragonfly food. Oops. Maybe Lord Markham should have hired an exterminator instead. After clearing out the nest, we can loot some boxes, which nets us a bunch of goodies and our seashell. I'm not sure why we couldn't find that on the beach. Maybe all the other contestants got to them before us? We can also craft some potions with the reagents we collected, one of which we can trade with some other contestants for a hat, and we keep a red potion for the contest, putting us at half the needed treasures. All we need now is the tile, instrument, and longbow. We also locate a dragon's cave which we enter. Luckily, the dragon is on rat extermination duty when we enter, giving us enough time to snag treasures in the ground before he turns his attention to us. One of the treasures we found is actually a shield for the missing contestants, who had the misfortune of becoming chew toys for the dragon inside. We can just trade that into the judge for some extra golden experience later. Finally, we enter this hidden temple filled with bats, rats, and these absolutely creepy skull spiders that remind me way too much of Skulltulas from Ocarina of Time. Seriously, these things are pretty creepy looking. We also get an example of some dungeoneering aspects here, like persistent traps that fling fireballs, hidden treasure compartments, trapped treasure chests that explode if we don't have disarm trap, and hidden rooms. We also find these other contestants inside. Sal Sharktooth over here attempts to bully us if we talk to him, so we decide to kill him and his friends and grab his longbow. A little more exploring and we find the tile we need too. The only thing left is the instrument, which we can find outside, carried by the only minstrel in town. We buy it off her for 500 gold, but if you're feeling cruel, you could loot it off her body, or even lure the dragonflies over to do your dirty work for you. But that just seems unnecessary. With all that done, we turn in all our treasures and we win the contest. We're now officially Lords of Harmondale. So we get on the boat and leave Tutorial Island and set sail for our new home.
Congratulations, my friends. Your new castle is located in Harmondale, a peaceful village on the edge of the elvish kingdom of Tularia, but firmly within human territory. Though there are many privileges to being the lord of this estate, there are many responsibilities as well. Public safety, for example. And oh, I almost forgot. Goblins have taken an interest in your new lands. I'm sure brave adventurers such as yourselves will have no trouble with them. So, enjoy your new home. May you rule your lands wisely.
So, bad news. Remember how I said Lord Markham's scavenger hunt seemed too easy for the prize of nobility? Well, Markham duped us. We learn from the townsfolk that Harmondale is smack in the middle of contested territory between the human kingdom of Rathia and the elven kingdom of Avley, and whoever owns Harmondale tends to meet a pretty quick death. On top of all that, our own castle's been taken over by goblins. The outskirts of Harmondale are also swarming with goblins, and the castle itself is in disarray. None of our subjects even believe we'll make it for too long. If we check the logbook, we get some history in Harmondale. It's apparently been contested territory for some time, trading hands between different territories often. It was originally involved in the Timber Wars, which encompassed war between Arathia and Avley about 500 years ago. At one point, its own citizens pulled a French Revolution and took out its own baron. Pretty violently, I might add, since he was torn to actual pieces over his high taxes. They then installed their own mayor, who lasted 6 weeks before the Arathian king took it back, who then himself died 2 weeks later. About 200 years later, necromancers controlled the castle, and it was a pretty dark time for the denizens of Harmondale. Apparently they were doing something in the castle basement, but no one was sure quite what, but it involved a lot of missing prisoners. Yikes. So first things first is we get inside of our dilapidated castle and reclaim it from the goblins, the rats, and the bats festering inside. We also get introduced to barrels in this dungeon, which offer a permanent +2 to a single stat, depending on the color of the liquid. Your stats don't normally increase between levels. You have to find other means of increasing them like this instead. After clearing things out, we let our butler know that the castle is free of baddies. We pick up a few new quests from the local townspeople. You'll notice the NPCs can have some pretty interesting names, including Leonard Skinner. Quite a few of the NPCs are named after celebrities, and it's pretty amusing. There's a Norris who teaches us unarmed combat later too, a reference to Chuck Norris. One of the quests we pick up asks us to find a man's missing brother, and another man near the tavern suggests if we find any signal fires, we can light them to get reinforcements. Luckily for us, we found out this is a load of crap, based on a message we located, and we can call him out on it too. In turn, he attacks, allowing us to kill him and prevent a potential ambush. Feels like everyone is seriously out to get us. When we walk outside the town, we find goblins everywhere, in a fort which the goblins have taken over, which have some magical artillery that they're firing on us. We do have a little bit of backup from some guards who are roaming around, but with how vastly they're outnumbered, it's hard to even keep them alive. If you're watching the gameplay, you might also notice that Fanny Ryder keeps getting slapped around a lot, and that's because certain enemies in this game have preferred races or classes to attack. In this case, these goblins really have it out for dwarves, which we only have one of in our party. After taking control of the fort and finding a depressing message about one of the previous guards holding it down, we can turn the tables on the invaders and blast them with the fort's artillery. A little bit more exploration, and we can locate an obelisk, which on clicking it gives us a tiny bit of a message. This is actually part of a much larger, unmarked quest, which leads us to treasure much, much later in the game. Finally, we happen upon a cave, and, upon entering, find it's filled with troglodytes and slimes. The troglodytes appear to be attempting to clear the slimes out, but unfortunately for them, the slimes are impervious to physical damage and have to be killed with magic. We take advantage of the chaos to loot everything, and stumble on a set of cards and a note written by none other than the brother that's gone missing. Pocketing his cards and returning to his brother to give him the grim news, he rewards us for our effort and lets us keep the cards. What do these cards do, you ask? They're used to play Arcomage, which is a game within a game for Might and Magic 7. We can challenge any of the taverns to an Arcomage duel, and the game is oddly fun despite its simplicity. So, basically the win conditions are any of the following: getting your opponent's tower to 0, getting your own tower to a certain level, or get over a certain amount of any resource. The win conditions and start conditions vary from tavern to tavern too, so certain strategies work better in one tavern than another, but it mostly comes down to luck. If you look at her hand, each card uses a certain amount of resources of either bricks, gems, or monsters, and you have an income of bricks, gems, and monsters each turn based on your mines, magics, and dungeons respectively, which cards can increase or decrease. On top of that, you have cards that can damage, build up your wall, or build up your tower. You don't get any new cards the more you play, unfortunately, so the game can get a little repetitive, but I like it. If you want any pro strats for Arcomage, basically prioritize building up your income, then keep your tower and walls as high as possible. Sometimes it's possible to destroy the opponent's tower, but it's rare and conditional in getting the right setup. Typically, you're attacking more often to keep your opponent's towers small, so you have a higher chance of building yours bigger. Anyway, that's Arcomage in a nutshell. Every time we beat a new tavern, we're rewarded with some money, and beating all the taverns eventually completes a quest with some solid treasure as a reward. With Harmondale safe, our butler lets us know that Arathi and Avli will never take us seriously, so we should go ask the Dwarven King for help instead. But before that, we can go check out the surrounding areas to help us level up and beef up our gear. First, let's head over east to Arathia. We can either walk there, which takes 5 in-game days, or travel by carriage to get there faster. Traveling in-game consumes time, so you can walk to adjacent locations, or find a boat or carriage to travel to even non-adjacent places faster, but for a small sum of gold. Also, carriages and boats only travel to one location per day on a set schedule, so sometimes things won't line up and hoofing it ends up being faster. So we arrive at Arathia, whose leader is Catherine Griffinheart, wife of Roland Ironfist. Roland is the brother of Archibald, if you remember him from the intro, and the two of them are major characters in Heroes of Might and Magic 2. Roland also has a son with Catherine named Nikolai, who appears in a majorly annoying side quest in Might and Magic 6, but is absent from this game. Maybe he joined the circus full-time back home. Catherine herself plays a pivotal role in Heroes of Might and Magic 3, so she and her family are kind of a big deal. Arathia itself houses the capital of Sedgwick, which is a castle town with plenty to do, and a thief problem, which the denizens helpfully warn us about. In fact, exploring the surrounding areas, we encounter plenty of bandits and thieves. We can also find a small hideout where we can locate a stolen ring for a quest back in Harmondale. There's various sewer entrances where we can enter Sedgwick's absolutely massive sewer complex. Seriously, who designed this? Does the capital have modern plumbing? This is the absurdly spacious sewer trope dialed up to 11. There's even magical teleporting doors, booby traps, and a lever puzzle to put a platform together, which seems like a very odd set of things to install in a sewer system, but hey, maybe Queen Catherine is really into public infrastructure. We can also find William Lasker in the sewers, who's apparently a top-tier spy with a very strange preference in living conditions. He can promote Jenny from a thief to a rogue if we steal Lord Markham's vase. And since we have it out for that jerk anyway, it's basically killing two birds with one stone. Back in Sedgwick, we play some Archimage, grab some quests, and we head off to Deja. Deja is goblin territory, filled with evil folk and necromancers. In fact, it's so evil that store hours are reversed. That's right, stores open at 6 p.m. These guys are really into the nightlife. It's also got harpies everywhere, which are annoying because they apparently hate goblins, meaning Robin Hood isn't going to have a good time here. Their attacks can also inflict status ailments like drunk and fear, adding to how irritating they tend to be. We'll come back here later, but we pick up a few quests, one of which is to find a map to the Evanmorn Isles. We also locate a very useful hireling in Vanessa the Locksmith, who helps by raising the disarm trap level of my party for 3% of the gold we find. It might be worth mentioning here that hirelings are a really great way of evening out rough spots in your party, or helping to strengthen what you already have. You can find hirelings who can do everything from casting spells a certain number of times per day, to raising skill levels from weapons to armor to magic to utility skills, or help you find more gold or raise resistance levels. Basically, this lets you make all sorts of parties without worrying too much about what you might be short on. You can always hire 2 people at a time, but you can dismiss them whenever you want, and each playthrough will have different randomized hirelings to choose from. It's pretty neat. Next, we'll move on to Tolarian Forest, which houses Pierpont, the capital of the Elven Avley Kingdom. We do our standard quest gathering and Archimage playing, and move on to Avley to knock out an easy dungeon. We were tasked with 2 quests to enter the Hall of the Hill, which contains the Fairy King. We simply have to walk clockwise around the hill to open up the hidden door and walk inside to find the Fairy King. Super easy. Some guy wanted us to get some pipes from the Fairy King too, which he gives us to the cost of all of our food. And the other quest was just to ask him to promote our rangers to hunters, which he does so happily for free, making this one of the easiest promotion quests in the game. It's worth mentioning now that even if you don't have that class in your party, all of your characters can gain an honorary promotion title regardless of their class and a good chunk of experience. So it's usually worth doing promotion quests. Plus, it'll open up the second promotion quest later in the game for even more experience. After talking to the Fairy King, we hop down the elevator to a hidden area and find a ring that enhances our air magic, which goes right to Cherry. This makes it so our air magic hits even harder. I especially love the spark spell early on, which flings lightning orbs all over the screen. It's a great way to clear crowded rooms of weak enemies. We traverse further back and find a hidden staircase with even more treasure, which thanks to our hireling we open up without any explosions. Seriously, I love exploring dungeons in this game. Between the little hidden rooms and finding small gear upgrades and gold, it's absolutely addicting. And since most of the loot is randomized, no 2 playthroughs feel the exact same. Might and Magic may not be the most impressive game, but if it gets anything right, it's the charm of dungeoneering. Back in town, we pick up some trade goods that we can sell for profit in different locations. There's basically 2 trade triangles where you can pick up resources from one place and sell them in another, with the only issue being how much inventory space it takes up. Every gold counts as early on, so we can afford new spells and training. With that out of our way, we train up our characters a bit. We especially want to get expert in water magic so we can grab water walking for Cherry, which allows us to traverse water without our characters taking drowning damage. Basically, oceans and seas are lava until you get water walking. Thankfully, back at Pierpont, we have plenty of elemental magic stores to look through, and luckily find a tome to teach us water walking. We can use that now to head over to a small island next to Tolarian Forest mainland, filled with evil trees with these nightmarish teeth that enjoy throwing fireballs at us. Seriously, these things creep me out as a kid. Why do trees need chompers? The in-game reason is that these trees turned evil after the Heart of the Woods was stolen, which implies they started eating travelers based on people mentioning folks disappearing. After collecting kindling, we can go scale some cliffs to find a super secret chest that contains a black potion. Black potions are super rare and can give a character a one-time permanent 50-point boost to one stat. Each character can only drink one black potion for each stat, but 50 points this early is a pretty big deal. Next we head to the swamps of Tatalia, which is back in Arathian territory, where Lord Jerkim lives. We use our water walking skills to head over to a cove. Oddly, there's a weapon and armor shop over here, which seems like a really bad real estate choice on their end when there's a thriving town not too far away. Entering the cove, we find it's filled with thieves and the undead, and there's a boat that's either dry docked or shipwrecked in the middle and is filled with treasures and ghosts. Not sure how the thieves sleep in here knowing that there's swarms of the living dead inside, but hey, maybe they're all friends or the thieves practice necromancy? Who am I to judge? After navigating the boat and claiming its treasure, we find the map to the Evanmorn Isles, which will not only help us finish the priest promotion quest, but we can now take a boat to the Evanmorn Isles on the 7th day of every week. Before we leave Tatalia, we also find this little stonehead structure, which counts towards completing the Great Druid promotion quests. There's a few more things to do in Tatalia, but we'll come back later to finish the area once we're a bit stronger. In the meantime, we'll head to the Barrow Downs, which houses a major dungeon and also is home to the Dwarven Kingdom. The Barrow Downs is a haunted wasteland filled with ghosts and these incredibly annoying enemies called Gogs who throw fireballs at you, but if you kill them in melee, they explode when they die for some reason. So I try to finish them off with arrows when I can from a distance, so I don't need to deal with the singed eyebrows afterwards. We also find some houses scattered around the Barrow Downs, and I genuinely wonder why these people made their home in the middle of a ghost-filled wasteland. Sure, Rathia was filled with thieves and Tolarian had those living trees, but in both cases everyone mentioned how this was an issue and they were worried about it. But these people just willingly move into a place covered in ghosts and just seem to accept their living conditions. Takes all types, I suppose. So just to cement the Barrow Downs being spooky central, it also houses the Dwarven Barrows, a Dwarven mausoleum which are absolutely filled with not only the standard rats and bats, but also ghouls, ghosts, skeletons, zombies, and wights. These guys are really annoying because almost every enemy in here can cause status ailments ranging from disease, weakness, curse, fear, and even some enemies that can cause magical aging to those they hit. Luckily, my cleric can take care of most of those issues, and we have plenty of potions to take care of the rest. The Dwarven Barrows are also some of the most unique dungeons in the game. It's split between 16 smaller sections with varying difficulties, linked between a maze that either demands the player to be lost or to get smart and start jotting things down. So get this, every area is numbered from 1 to 15, plus one last area. Most barrows are linked to 4 other barrows, but 3 of them are linked to 2 other barrows and one of the 3 possible exits to the outside. If you look in the center here, we're in room 5, so we can exit the left or right tunnel. If we move the lever next to the tunnel on the left, we can either go to barrow 2 if it's on the top, or barrow 1 if it's on the bottom. And on the right side, we have barrows 9 and 12. It's an absolute maze in here and super easy to get lost, and I have to find keys to even reveal which path goes where, which usually requires finding hidden doors and levers to get some hidden treasure. As a kid, I remember clicking endlessly in an attempt to escape. As an adult, I'm smart enough to write everything down and mark off where I've been, making the journey a lot less painful. Inside, we have 2 major quests and plenty of treasures to pick up. I make sure I take my time and clear out everything for the experience and gold and find a few upgrades in the process. Eventually, I find one chamber filled with wights and vampires, and after dispatching them, we pray at an altar in the center, and the monk promotion quest giver breaks out his psychic Bluetooth and telepathically contacts us and promotes us so we don't have to go head back to him to turn in the quest. Wish more quest givers could do that. We also explore another area and find a lantern for this guy named Taryn back at Harmondale, who apparently came down with the magical chickenpox. And with that, we're done with the Barrow Downs, and I exit to the outside. Upon hitting the fresh air, however fresh haunted air can be, I make my way across this rope bridge and fight some gargoyles and gogs along the way. I find a chest with some golem limbs inside, which will come in handy later, and make my way to the Dwarven Kingdom. Dwarves in this game are very Tolkien-esque and mostly live underground and have a thriving, bustling community, even if it feels a little cramped down here. After beating them at Archimage, I head over to King Hrothgar IX, who decides there might be more than meets the eye to my little band, and says he'll go and do me a solid if I go save some dwarves who got turned into stone in a mine shaft in Borkata Desert. He even gives us the potion to help save them. Before leaving, we also pick up a side quest to clear out some troglodytes from the chambers beneath the city, which we do pretty quickly and snag another obelisk and some treasures. Before leaving the Barrow Downs, we head over to this haunted mansion, complete with an army of ghouls and ghosts. There's plenty of hidden paths around here and plenty of treasures, but the two big reasons to come here are to complete the night promotion quest and snag one of the 3 paintings someone from Titalia was asking for. With medieval Spencer's mansion cleaned out, we head to Bracada. Bracada Desert is filled with mages and is home to a bunch of golems who are protecting the townsfolk as they wander in the middle of nowhere. Most of the buildings here are scattered around, and you have to use teleporters if you want to get anywhere quickly. There's also a mage guild here that gives us a quest to promote sorcerers, and they ask us to gather 6 parts of a golem and put it together. We also locate 2 golem heads in Bracada, along with a bill of sale which tells us where each of the parts went. Interestingly, the 2 heads are there to mess with the player. One of them is dented and defective, and installing the wrong head causes the golem we eventually create to go berserk. Knowing this, I find the non-dented variety and install it because having a pet golem sounds fun. We eventually clear out some griffins on the way to the mines the Dwarf King told us about. We find the petrified dwarves inside and are able to save them one at a time. They're scattered throughout the tunnels and seem quite confused and scared upon being turned back to flesh. The tunnels are thankfully Medusa-free, but they are filled with slimes, who we kill by throwing wands of fire on each of our characters and blasting them with fireballs. The Medusas are actually currently in the lower levels of the mineshaft, and we could go down there right now and complete the Archer promotion quest, but my character would struggle a bit against the Medusas, especially since they tend to spam paralysis and petrification spells, which my party would struggle with at the moment. But we'll come back later to handle them. If we had an archer, I'd be a lot more willing to run down there, but for now, we keep going and bring the dwarves back to Hothvar, who thanks us and says we're welcome back whenever we want. He even sends some engineers to fix up our castle and lets us know that our work has intrigued the other courts of nobility and to check our throne room when we get back. When we get back to our castle, we find that not only has it been cleaned up, but a hidden staircase reveals a path down to a jail and torture chamber. Remember those necromancers in the history book that were taking prisoners in Harmondale about 200 years back? Yeah, this is their dirty work. We find some notes about a torture of a man named Seljan, who was being tortured to reveal the location of the Tomb of the Master, which apparently lies in southern Arathia. We'll note that down for now, and head back to the throne room, where we find Alan Rockway, the Arathian ambassador, and Elaine Hanny, the Evelian ambassador who has a forehead you could land a jet on. They both ask us to talk to their respective leaders. So we head over to speak to Queen Catherine first, who admits she wasn't taking us seriously until after we gained the Dwarven King's favor, and then asks us to rescue someone who was totally not a spy or anything, who got arrested for totally not spying or anything. What's worse is, if we don't rescue him within a few weeks, he's scheduled to be executed. I make a quick detour over to Avley to grab the monolith there to get my druid one step closer to promotion, which unfortunately involves fighting through a lot of wyverns, one of which has the chance of instantly killing one of my party members. Not just lowering HP or anything, it just has a chance of inflicting instant death on characters with each attack. There's a few enemies of this variety in the game, and it's always annoying to deal with. Luckily, there's plenty of town guards, so I lure some of the wyverns back to the town and make the guards help me deal with removing their own problem. Afterwards, I head back to Pierpont and talk to the Elven King. Like Catherine, he also wants our help, but this time in stealing the plans for Fort Riverstride, which is back in Arathia. You'll notice we have an extra dialogue option where we can tell him about Queen Catherine's plans, and if we do, he'll help us out by giving us an imposter of that guy who's totally not a spy that we can give back to Catherine. Once we get the King's Quest, Catherine can also give us fake Riverstride plans, so we actually have a few choices whether we could double-cross both groups, side with one, or completely ignore them both. So basically, the Avley-Arathian border conflict can end in Harmondale being a vassal of either Avley or Arathia, or, if we do it right, we can remain neutral. But it requires a bit of finesse. Since we're going to help Harmondale remain neutral, we're going to accept and complete both rulers' requests. In the meantime, we run off to the hills and find a hidden entrance to the Tellurian caves. Inside, we find troglodytes, wyverns, and elven guards. Fighting through the area, we eventually happen on a note from Gavin Magus, who wants to end the fighting between Catherine and Eldritch, and mentions it's actually strengthening Archibald by having the war continue. He seems to be genuinely pro-peace. Further in, we find our goal, Lauren Steele the Spy, locked up inside. We made it in time and rescued him, and he joins our party. Now, funny enough, if we take him back to King Eldritch and tell him what we did, he's surprised by our absurd levels of stupidity and honesty and summarily executes us. So instead, we head back to Arathia to get Lorensteel to safety, where he's offered a new job since his days of being a spy are over. Without letting Catherine know we're about to double-cross her, we also head off to Fort Riverstride. There's actually 2 entrances to this dungeon, and we enter through the back one, found underneath the fort over the bridge. We have to use the jump spell to get inside. Inside, we find plenty of archers and a variety of guards. We're more than strong enough to mow them down, and behind a painting we locate the hidden Fort Riverstride plans. With the plans in hand, we go back to the Elf King and complete his end of the bargain. With that done, we actually need to wait a little bit for the next event to start. So I burned some time training and raising my skills, which eats up a few in-game days. When the game is ready, a messenger approaches us, letting us know that he has a letter for us, explaining everything. An artifact was stolen by the elves and moved to Tolarian caves, and Arathian forces were dispatched to get it back. Moving to the battle site, we see the humans absolutely annihilating the elves. I have no idea if this was intentionally lopsided, but they're absolutely obliterated. In a chest nearby, we can find the Horn of Griffinheart. Now at this point, we can return it to either of the rulers, but there's a third option. The Harmondale Arbiter, Judge Grey. By returning the horn to him, we guarantee the neutrality of Harmondale. With the conflict settling down, I decide to go back to knocking out my side quests, including going back to Markham Manor and getting past most of his security and escaping with his precious phase. I also take this time to head to Evanmorn Isles. Remember the map I got from the Cove? Now we just need to wait for the right day and shoot over there. The Evanmorn Isles is a weird place. It's got a tavern and dock and a few random people still living on the islands. Otherwise, there's a ton of wrecked houses, destroyed by the undead inhabiting the isles. To make matters worse, the Orders of the Sun and Moon inhabit the isles and are at war. Since we have no chill, we infiltrate both temples and clear them out, netting us plenty of gold. First, we take on the Temple of the Moon, which is much smaller and has a darker atmosphere, and it has undead lurking within. There's also this clever little puzzle where you fall into a room that looks like it's otherwise impossible to get out of, only to find the lever to open the doors on the outside, which you have to use telekinesis to open through the bars. If you don't have the spell, no problem. There's a few hidden telekinesis scrolls on the inside. The Temple of the Sun is a much bigger and well-lit temple and offers a few puzzles of its own, but otherwise we're in and out with tons of extra treasure and experience. Both temples also drop a special cape that enhances either dark or light magic, which we'll be holding on to for later. We're just about finished with the islands for now, so we head back and promote Terry to Great Druid and Jenny to Rogue, and now we have a full team of 2nd level promotes. This also lets Cherry master air magic, which allows her to cast Fly, one of the most useful spells of the game, which makes navigating outdoor maps much faster. With our newfound stats, we can also take out a blue dragon for the Paladin promotion quest. His name is Wormthrax, and I think one of the devs may have been going through a divorce while creating this quest. Not only are blue dragons way on the higher end of combat spectrum, but asking a player to kill it for the first promotion quest seems really mean. It's not even toned down a little bit to make it less annoying for the player to kill. If you attempt to charge straight at the dragon while lower level, you're sure to get wrecked. My characters are high enough level that they can handle it, but wow, is this a mean promotion quest. The worst part is they could have made it a green dragon instead, which is also pretty tough, but toned down a little bit. If you're playing this and want to promote early, the saving grace here is that the area is so big that you can simply run around and slowly chip at its health with arrows and spells while dodging his projectile attacks. The quest giver, aptly named Don Quixote, promotes us to honorary crusaders for the task after doing nothing to help kill it, but sitting in our party the entire time. Thanks, dude. Final thing worth mentioning is that the loot isn't decided until you pick up the enemy's corpse, and the blue dragons are high enough on the loot table that they can drop relics, powerful high-tier equipment. So if you really wanted to fish for extremely high-level gear early on, this is a good time to do it. While we're wrapping things up, we can also go back to those mines and deal with the Medusas below. Although they can still paralyze or petrify our party, my party can at least kill them fast enough that we're not at high risk. Although I did run into a spot where Throbbin, Jenny, and Cherry were all paralyzed or petrified, so clearly they can still be a problem. If you happen to have the protection from magic spell, you could avoid all this, but I unfortunately didn't find it in any of the shops despite Fanny being able to cast it. The best part is killing one of the Empress Medusas in this section grants a pendant that makes you immune to petrification. Wow, thanks. Sure could have used that earlier. We then sabotage the lift and escape before the lift stops working to complete the Archer promotion quest. Fun fact, you can get stuck down here if you don't escape fast enough. Not that it's hard to escape on time if you go straight there, but if you don't have a teleport spell, you're screwed and have to spend weeks in the caverns without resting while your party slowly dies of exhaustion. Way to go. Sure, you get teleported back to Harmondale if you ever die since you quote-unquote cheat death or whatever, but you also lose every shred of gold not in the bank in the process. Not worth it. While in Burkata, we also show off our completed golem for our last promotion, which will then become our guardian inside Castle Harmondale when we head back there. Not that he has anything to fight, but it's cool that we have our own golem. One final step is that we need to go visit Nigon. The only way to get there is to go back to the Barrow Downs, through the Dwarven City, and then find a door deep beneath the city where we previously cleaned out the troglodyte issue. There inside we find a veritable war between the dwarves and warlocks of Nigon fighting together against hordes of gogs. They mostly fight each other except for when the warlocks throw a stray attack that hits a dwarf and pockets of dwarves and warlocks start going after one another. But for the most part the dwarves and warlocks seem to have things covered. And the caves themselves are kind of uninspired compared to the areas we've been in so far. We finally weave our way through these caves to find yet another set of caves called Thunderfist Mountain, populated by Minotaur and Beholders. These can be tough, especially if the game throws some of the higher tier Minotaurs at you, which also have that extra annoying instant death attack they can spam at you. The Beholders, on the other hand, mostly spam status ailments, but are otherwise easy enough for me to take out at this point. We quickly navigate to the exit and enter the territory of Nigon. Now these guys previously worked with the Kriegans, otherwise known as Devils, during the events of Heroes of Might and Magic 3, and are basically reforming bad guys, and quite a few of its populace discussed their regret in allying with the Kriegans. Nigon also unfortunately houses some important master level skill trainers, which is why we're here. In particular, we have alchemy, water, and dagger masters for our party. This always struck me as particularly cruel to place out so far from the player's reach, especially since Water Master in particular grants Terry the use of Town Portal, which feels like a must-have quality of life improvement for navigation. With it, we can teleport to any of the major areas, Harmondale, Arathia, Tularian Forest, Nigon, and eventually 2 other places we haven't unlocked. But it massively cuts down on travel time. The surrounding areas away from the town are a bit higher level than I'm willing to take on at the moment, so we just use our newfound teleportation abilities and zip right back to Harmondale. Back in Harmondale, we're told that Judge Grey has died from a heart attack, and we need to appoint a new judge in his place. 2 factions suggest choosing one of their judges, and this is where the plot massively diverges. We can either choose one of Gavin Magus's judges, Judge Fairweather, or we can go with Archibald's judge, Judge Sleen. Basically, we get to pick if we want the path of good or evil. Interestingly, there is a canonical choice, and New World Computing wanted the evil route to be canon at first, but after fan backlash, the actual canon choice is the path of good. In gameplay terms, the choice automatically puts you at odds with the opposite faction, so the Wizards of Burkata are automatically against you if you're evil, while the Dacian Goblins are against you if you're good. This also determines whether or not you get access to light or dark magic, which are both powerful in their own right, but opposite in many ways. Light magic has some very useful buffing spells like Hour of Power, which simultaneously gives you every buff to cast at the same time at Grandmaster at 4 times your point in light magic, so the equivalent of having 40 points in a given spell school. Dark, on the other hand, has some very strong damaging spells and the ability to enchant weapons with vampirism. On top of that, the evil versus good promotion quests are different. Sometimes they're reciprocal, like the Paladin having to rescue a maiden for the good aligned quest and kidnapping her for the evil aligned version. Others are just completely different, such as the good druid needing to restore the heart of the forest to its rightful place, whereas the evil druid just needs to steal a dragon egg. Finally, the other big difference is that some classes benefit differently from their second promotion depending on if you went light or dark. Monk's final promotion on the dark path makes them a ninja, who can master disarm, trap, and thieving, versus becoming the light path master gives access to the master level self magic without the boost in their utility skills. Since I'm a macabre goth, the dark path just suits me better. So we're going to invite Judge Sleen to come on over to Harmondale, despite the fact that we're willingly and knowingly allying ourselves with necromancers and other dark entities. We get a quick cutscene where Sleene very intentionally allows the border conflict to escalate, which leads to an all-out war, which the necromancers of Deja are delighted about and gleefully discuss how they wish they could get their enemies to fight more often. Just FYI, if we had chosen the light path, fair weather would convince both sides to a truce, and Catherine would remark that there's an even bigger threat looming on the horizon. But hey, maybe Arathia and Avli should have thought about not pissing me off by making me their errand girl and trying to take over my shit, so maybe they deserve this. So off I go to Castle Gloaming, which is a very metal name for a castle. It's located in the pit, which is located in Deja Moors. So after heading there, I go through a short dungeon where all the monsters inside leave me alone for a change, which means news of genitalia and Robin Hood's exploits have reached far and wide. You might have also noticed my very cool black and red screen aesthetic, which looks miles better than the light side's white and gold. Hashtag just got things. The pit is filled with lava everywhere, so I guess they just have great indoor heating, and after playing a round of Evil Archomage, I head over to Castle Gloaming. I will say that navigating the pit is a pain. The areas are divided through a teleporter that takes you from place to place sequentially, which feels evil to do to the player, so hey, at least they're keeping things thematic? Inside Castle Gloaming, we navigate down the lava river, which is actually just a set of teleports, but I guess it's a boat in the theater of our minds. Anyway, we reach Archibald, who actually comes off as pretty charismatic, all things considered. We also get our first task, which is to enter the breeding pit and get out the other side. Not exactly sure why they call this place the breeding pit, other than the fact that it has a lot of behemoths inside. Maybe it's got that name for spicier reasons? It otherwise has a bunch of fire elementals, which are non-problematic to fight, but once we jump down and come face to face with a bunch of behemoths, and especially ancient behemoths, it's a big leap in difficulty. These guys are rough to fight through. The young behemoths are easy enough, but all the behemoth variants have a habit of breaking armor, which thankfully Robin Hood is an excellent blacksmith at this point. But between the sheer bulk and damage, they're not easy to carve a path through. We also find a book of divine intervention down here, which is actually light magic and for a light quest line, so it does us no good. At the final leg, we have to weave through sewers and escape. We could fight our way through, but I decided going invisible and escaping would be less trouble. So out we go, and we have officially proven ourselves to Archibald's advisors. Archibald lets us know that his advisors have new tasks for us, so let's go chat with them. The advisors' names are actually a big tell as to who they are. You see, they share the same default names with the party from Might and Magic 3, except it's not just the names that they share, but we'll get into that later. Each of them gives us a few tasks that we need to complete, most of which involve entering Celestia, the last remaining town we haven't entered, and home to the angels. Yes, the kind with wings. So let's get started on impressing them. The first quest is to take an altar piece from both the Temple of Light and Dark. The Dark Temple's nearby, and Castor says although we're allowed inside, if the guards give us any problem, they're not important enough for him to mind if we clobber them. Really leaning into the evil archetype, geez. Maximus wants some soul jars from Thunderfist Mountain, which is back in Nigon, easy enough. We also have to disable the defenses in Clanker's Lab, which is a dungeon in Tellurian Forest. We can also pick up more Dark Promotion quests while we're at it, and with that, we're ready to start knocking out the endgame. First, let's go to that Dark Temple place, which is already located in the pit. I do actually decide to go and take a whack at the guards since the place is filled with gold, and I'm a broke bitch at the moment. Unfortunately, this raises my bounty, but I'll pay that back much later. Since I'm already evil and everyone hates me, and I have a quest inside, I slaughter everyone in the Elven Castle and raid their hidden treasury, which completes a promotion quest. I then head over to Clanker's Lab and deal with the Gogs and Beholders inside, and snag a few black potions inside for some phenomenal stat boost, and some reagents from my alchemist to crank out some better potions. We even find Clanker himself, who is actually a Beholder, and killing him nets us an amulet, which grants us a hefty plus 15 to alchemy to the wearer. According to the wiki, Clanker's first name is Clive, so maybe at some point he was human and turned himself into a Beholder? Regardless, now that he's dead, we can deactivate the shield that's apparently protecting this place. It's supposedly a teleport shield, so maybe it's stopping people from warping inside? I don't know. But hey, we're already done. We also shoot back over the Evanmorn Isles to defile the Sun Temple's altar for another side quest, just in case you wanted to know if those temples were related to any quest lines. This lets us promote to Cleric of the Dark and learn Grandmaster self-spells. Next, we also invade Arathia and complete the quest that demands we kill every griffin in Arathia, even the ones allied to us. To continue our rampage, we also invade Stedwick's castle with 2 goals: find 2 paintings for a collector, and also kidnap the whiny but otherwise entirely innocent Alice Hargreaves. The villainy is in full gear now. It's worth noting that you could just go invisible to get the paintings, but again, we're evil. Might as well make the most of it. We also head back to Markham's estate to finish off the last of his guard and find a note indicating that Markham completely intended to pawn off Harmondale knowing that it was more trouble than it was worth. Well, I hope replacing your guards are worth it, dickbag. I also tackle 2 light-specific optional dungeons. The first is a crypt hidden under a wine cellar. I have to say these necromancers are kind of a vibe. The second is a mercenaries guild which normally houses the Light Druid promotion questline, but I'm just here to cause pain and collect treasure. Oh, have I mentioned allying with either the Pit or Celeste gives us an expansion to Harmondale? They install an entire upstairs, complete with a library and bedrooms. We even find a scroll explaining ciphers in here, which theoretically comes in handy for another quest. Back in Burkata, we enter the Enrothian version of Hogwarts and start pulling a Voldemort by murdering every wizard with a pulse. We find a secret switch behind the front counter, which lets us enter the full area. This section would be easy if it were not for 2 issues. The first is that these wizards love to spam Summon Light Elemental, which clogs this area up with a lot of baddies. And light elementals explode on death like Gogs. On top of that, the wizards themselves love to cast a spell, removing all my buffs and making my party a lot less powerful in the process. After a bit, I managed to get through and get my hands on a scroll that supposedly reveals the location of the Tomb of Kings. The thing is, the cipher system they use is so overtly complicated that as a kid, I could not figure it out. Basically, we need to assign an integer to every letter, and then find the right word to use to unlock the cipher. Stephen Sand, the quest giver, says the 3rd word on the scroll we just got is the key to unlocking it. The 3rd word is pattern. So we get ready for this because it's going to be brain melting. Subtract the integer value of each letter from the integer value of the cipher we were given. This is supposedly explained in one of the scrolls we got in Harmondale. So basically, for instance, y is 25 minus p, which is 16, which gives us I, 9. The next letter subtracted is a, then t, then t, then e, then r, then n. So we keep using pattern to repeatedly decode each letter one at a time. This is pretty convoluted for a video game main quest line that I have no idea what New World Computing was even thinking. There is no way I could have solved this as a kid. I don't know if I could have solved it as an adult. Like, what did people do back in the 90s? I guess we're all choosing the light path and didn't need to touch this quest, but still. So you have to subtract the number from the top and the number on the bottom, and we get this. So you get the big number minus the little number, and you get the other number. The number represents what number on the 26 letters you're supposed to get. The fuck is this? This takes forever. It's big. This is only part of the message. I have to do math, and I have to know numbers and letters. That's rude. I'm too bimbo for that. Okay, so basically after translating it, we get this message. I have found the tomb of Master Kelwin and have deduced the code from his notes. It is north, east, southwest, and center. My job is done and the debt paid. Good luck. We go to Southern Arathia. If you remember that one scroll we found in the torture chamber earlier mentioning this is what this is in reference to. And we put in the code and the front door and we can grab a special item. Dear Lord. Next we raid Celeste, which houses our final tavern. And despite being her enemy, he's more than happy to play Archomage with us. You'll notice as we slaughter angels, we also are floating above the sky. Celeste boasts a very open floor plan. Some of the townsfolk even joke that they hope we don't have a quote-unquote falling out while we're here. Cute. Wonder if this place is OSHA compliant. While we're up here, I take out a villager that one of the Pit's people had a hit on. Apparently this villager is a defector named Lady Eleanor Carmine. All we need to do is take her out and steal her dagger. After completing her hit, we go to the Temple of Light and solve a small puzzle, which a nearby scroll explains. We simply need to put down one of the symbols, star, sun, and moon, in one of the 3 locations and then click the altar. Inside, we find the counterpart to the Dark Temple's altarpiece. Finally, we go into the Walls of Mist. This is the counterpart area to the breeding grounds of the Pit, except the Light Trial forces the player to go through it without being allowed to kill anything or they fail. We, however, do not have such a limitation. We do, however, have to retrieve 3 keys from 3 different areas, reach the teleporters in the center. After doing some small puzzles to find them all, we insert them all into pedestals and retrieve lich jars, needed for the sorcerer's final promotion quest. We turn in all our quests and train up a bit in the pit and grab Grandmaster Dark Magic for Fanny Ryder, which lets us permanently enchant all our melee weapons with vampirism, massively increasing our survivability in combat. We also turn in our Archomage questline and get Mind's Eye Relic, which grants some solid stat boosts and spell point regeneration over time, which goes straight onto Cherry. Some relics like these are only equipable in certain classes, race, alignments, or even gender. In this case, Mind's Eye is human only, which is part of the reason why I left Jerry as a human. Back in Avley, we enter the Titan Stronghold, one of the hardest areas in the game. It's swarmed with titans and dragons, and also contains the perfect bow, which is a promotion quest item. But the bigger deal is the treasure. Remember how blue dragons had a chance to drop high-level equipment, including relics and artifacts? Well, this place has a good number of them, so we can start snagging some really good gear. These enemies are not pushovers, though, even for a team as powerful as ours. After getting enough loot and the bow we need, I leave, and take on yet another dungeon hidden in Avley's hills. The Temple of Ba is hidden here. It contains the followers of Ba. This is a running gag in Universe where there are cults dedicated to different animals. Might and Magic 10 has the cat-themed Meow dungeon. Might and Magic 9 has the Temple of Honk, which is geese-themed. The Temple of Ba in this game is even shaped like a ram's head. There's also an actual Temple of Ba lore. Apparently, the Kriegans set up the Temple of Ba to heal the sick for free, but also to curse them to become mindless followers. Literally sheep. Fitting. And in the Temple of Ba, we find the devils fighting shoulder to shoulder with the cultists, so their alliance with the Kriegans is still going strong. Normally this location is needed for a light promotion quest, but I'm just here for the gold. We're evil, sure, but we're not evil enough to want the Kriegans to take over. Back to Nigon and back to Thunderfist Mountain. Inside, we finish our quest to grab the soul jars from the wizards within, the last request from the pit. We also start to clear out the surrounding areas of Nigon, which include rocks, warlocks, and an absolute ton of Hydra, who we are starting to slay without too much trouble. Wow, our party has really come a long way since some goblins bothered us at the start. There's also a Minotaur maze nearby, which we enter to retrieve Mazim Dusk's brother's remains. After fighting our way through the Minotaur and Warlock and Hydra, we find it and return it to Mazim, who may have some shady necromancy plans. Talk about raising a family. We make a quick trip back to the pit to train up and back to Harmondale, where all the goblins are back in the surrounding area. You see, this doesn't come up often, but areas respawn automatically after a certain period of time. Harmondale takes about 2 years to respawn. Barrowdown just takes a few months. But if a player takes a long enough time, it's very easy to see multiple areas respawn a few times over. But just to show off, I soar through the air and tear through the goblins, showing off just how far the party has come. Now finally, it's time to move on to endgame. First, we re-enter Thunderfist Mountain and find the tunnels to Eophel. These are another set of pretty boring tunnels that are swarming with Medusa and Behemoths, which luckily don't give us much trouble. There's really not much of anything to even talk about with this dungeon, and I think it's probably one of the weakest dungeons in the game. Leaving the tunnels, we come across Eophel. We get a telepathic message upon arriving from none other than Archibald. He informs us that he left the pit and set up shop in Clanker's lab. However, he tells us his brother, Roland, was imprisoned by the devils. He's genuinely distressed by this. Despite being an otherwise evil jerk, he actually cares a lot about his brother. He also gives us a laser gun? Yeah, a laser gun. If you're familiar with the Might and Magic series, one of the hidden traits in most of the games is that the planets have been seeded by an ancient spacefaring civilization that's been at war with the Kriegans. So, we have laser guns and advanced technology. Now, Eophel is absolutely barren except for throngs of devils, titans, and dragons. If you want to sit and fight everything, good luck. We also find Lassiter the Slayer here by himself as the only living person besides ourselves, and he can teach us Grandmaster Armsmaster, which is a great skill for a warrior. This dude is just out here with a whole ass house in the middle of a dragon, titan, and Kriegan infested territory. This guy has to be the strongest person in the universe if he's just out there chilling by himself. Unbothered king. Well, let's clear out some of the titans in front of his doorstep. On the way, we also find a shrine that actually acts as a magical teleporter between Eophel and none other than Harmondale. This makes trips back and forth a breeze. 2 more things is that there are 2 caves in the snow-capped mountains. One houses the Mega Dragon and a few other red dragons. These guys aren't super easy, and they also love breaking gear, which is irritating, but we manage well enough. The other cave is more dragons, but contains an egg for the Druid promotion quest. We turn in our final promotion quest, which turns our Druid into a Warlock and gives us a pet dragon as a familiar. The dragon gives the Warlock passive spell point regeneration, and even enhances all spell schools by 3. This is a dark exclusive route benefit, but it's one of the major reasons I picked Druid. Besides, who doesn't want a baby pet dragon? Finally, I decide to head over to Colony Zod, the Cregan fortress. I go invisible and fly there, so I need to burn time fighting. I just want to get to the end at this point. Colony Zod itself looks like one of those hatcheries or some sort of Zerg building from StarCraft. Just look at it. Why does it have to move like that? My party decides one of the tunnels must be an entrance, and into the flesh tubes we go. Inside, the Creegans don't put up massive resistance. In fact, they're fairly easy except for the fact that the highest tiered devil can drain MP down to 0 for whoever they hit, which can be exceptionally annoying but not much else. We even find more laser guns down here. After playing around with some controls that appear semi-mechanical, we find some cages of people they must have captured and done God knows what to. We find Roland Iron Fist, Catherine's husband and Archibald's brother, in one of these cages, thankfully safe, and free him. The only final step is to kill Xenofex, the Cregan leader on this planet. We scale up to the top of another chamber, and unfortunately, while he doesn't have his own model, we do find Xenofex chilling in a room full of other devil captains. The fight is more annoying than anything else, but we manage to off him and teleport to safety. Back in Arathia, we return Roland to Catherine, and Archibald attempts to make peace with his family. Catherine is having none of it and wants to sentence Archibald to death, but Roland interjects and banishes his brother instead. We also make a pit stop to the Evanmorn Islands, where I try out my Armageddon spell to clear out the respawn enemies. It's a map-wide nuke that hits everyone, including us, but we're bulky enough to survive while most everything else is wiped out or close to death. We're here for one reason though, the obelisk. We have all 15 obelisks now, and it spells out the message, Pirates 5, 1 survive. Hide the gold under the sand-white flower. Witching hour, bloom upon a haunted land. Now, you might think the haunted land is Barrow Downs, but it's actually Evanmorn. We have to go to a ring of stone right exactly at midnight, otherwise known as the witching hour, and it reveals some hidden treasure, including some pretty good artifacts. Back in the pit, Tolberti gives us a quest to kill Robert the Wise back in Celeste, and lets us know Archibald left the pit because his advisors were vying for his power. I kind of did things a bit out of order. Normally you're supposed to get this quest before going to Yoful for things to make more sense, and you'll see why in a second. When we approach Robert the Wise in his house, he pulls none other than a laser gun on us. This thing can hurt too, since it's the chance to insta-eradicate a character. Eradication is basically a super form of death where there's no body left to resurrect, so you need a higher level spell to bring them back to life, or just take them to a chapel where that costs a bit more gold than usual to restore them. Thankfully no one dies, but we get his gun and a mysterious cube. Tolberti back in the pit explains that you need to ask Castor about the whole cube thing, but if we help, we'll be in a much higher position than just Lords of Harmondale. Castor explains we need to stop the Creegans before they kill everyone, but luckily for him, we already put an end to Xenofex, and we tell him as much, instantly completing the quest. He also teaches us how to use laser guns, a brand new skill introduced at the end of the game. You might think the laser guns are better, but my team actually hits a heck of a lot harder with steel than they do with lasers, but we do train them up a bit because it does come in handy for one part. Castor finally also explains the entire plan now that we're on his good side.
Us well, and now deserve to know who we are and what our plan is. My companions and I are not of your world. We traveled here recently on a foolish mission to find the mythical ancients, and 2 of their agents named Korak and Shelton. Well, I'll tell you right now, there are no ancients.
That's not what you told us. You lied to us.
You heard what you wanted to hear.
What I want to hear now is your screams as you die.
We are done searching for ancients. We have a better plan now. When we arrived on your world, we decided to hide our vehicle in the sea and activate the security system. The ship's password had two parts, one known by me, the other by Resurrectra. We split up, and that was the last we saw of them. Without the password, the ship's security system will be very hard to defeat. So, this is where you come in. With this machine, we can make thousands of copies of this and rule this world for the benefit of our allies and us. We are missing a part, and we need you to get that part from the ship for us.
Here's a summary. Castor and his companions were actually in the same group as the advisors in Celeste, including Robert the Wise, who we just killed. They disagreed with one another and gone their separate ways. The light side wanted to find Shelton and Korak, who are androids that play a major role in the Might and Magic 1-5 games. Shelton is basically a big bad, and Korak is his good counterpart who tries to stop him. Anyway, Castor thinks finding them is a waste of time and rather do some evil shit. He finally, after a dozen quests and 20 plus hours, explained that they landed the spaceship, the Lincoln, in the middle of the ocean and crawled to the shore in wetsuits, which the goblins and elves in the intro cutscene mistook as sea monsters. Okay, so you might be asking, how did they get this spaceship? Well, the 8 companions on board the spaceship were actually the protagonists of Might and Magic 3, who escaped their world aboard the same ship, the Lincoln. This is a pretty huge callback that I unfortunately did not understand as a kid, since I hadn't played Might and Magic 3 at the time. But I would imagine fans of the series thought this was the coolest shit. Now, the big issue they want us to solve is to get apart the oscillation overthruster from the Lincoln. But the ship itself is going to have all its defenses active, since Castor only has half the password and Resurrecta, the light-aligned counterpart, has the other half. He let us know it's in Avli and that we need wetsuits to get to it, which thankfully he hands to us. Now we head back to Avli, and here is the most annoying thing in the game. We have to remove everything off our characters to put the wetsuit on. Necklace, rings, belt, armor, boots, weapons, shield, helmets, everything. And stash it in our inventory. We also can't use any weapons beside blasters while underwater. It's an inventory management nightmare, especially if you're fond of using multiple pieces of equipment to suit your situation. If you're fond of playing inventory management Tetris, this is pure gold. If you're anything like the rest of us, this part is ass. It's so easy to accidentally leave on a belt and have no idea why your character refuses to put on the scuba suit. After torturously removing and arranging gear, we simply head into the water and walk to the shoals, where we have an interesting underwater section and we have to fight sharks with our laser guns. The sharks also seem to have evolved the ability to fire magic out of their mouths. I don't even know what's happening anymore. They're just some normal sharks too. It's not like they're monster sharks. Finally, we reach the Lincoln and sneak on board. Now, the Lincoln is probably one of the hardest dungeons in the game. We enter and are not only immediately met with killer sentry bots, yes, fully mechanized robots that launch party-wide devastating attacks that hit like a Mack truck, but we start in our wetsuits. I rush off to safety to give myself a chance to buff up and slowly eliminate some of the easier packs before realizing the power is off, and most of the doors won't open. So we first have to find the on switch, which thankfully is close by. The Lincoln is a pretty decently big dungeon in its own right and very unique from the previous dungeons, but unfortunately there's not much loot and not much reason to find loot. Most of the best stuff is upgraded laser guns, which isn't extremely useful anyway. Finally, after searching around, I managed to track down the oscillation overthruster. Removing it, however, causes the Lincoln to start short-circuiting and spraying sparks everywhere, turning the ship into a death trap. Since I have down portal, I don't need to spend too much time inside and can just teleport out and return straight to Castor. There's not really a final boss or anything, but the final dungeon is by far one of the hardest challenges the game throws at you, and it feels pretty satisfying to complete. All in all, a fun but stressful conclusion. We return the Overthruster to Castor, who uses it to empower the Heavenly Forge that creates near infinite death lasers. He cranks it up to turn out 999 of them and starts handing them out like candy. The last thing we see is the forces of evil cheering victoriously over their conquered land, wreathed in flame and destruction. And like that, we took control of the world. So congrats to Robin Hood the Black Knight, Jenny Talia the Assassin, Fanny Ryder the Priest of Dark, and Cherry Poppins the Warlock. You guys did great. If you're curious about the light side, you'll have to play the game for yourself to experience all the little nuanced changes to quests and the ending itself. It's a lot happier, at the very least. So concludes my rundown of Might and Magic 7. Overall, I really love coming back to this game every once in a while. Its biggest strengths include excellent replayability and fun dungeon design. While its graphics have aged and weren't considered great quality for its time even back then, I still find the sprite work and set pieces really charming. I really love the progression system built in this game, where you start out as nobodies and end as heroes, or villains, depending on what choice you make. It's sort of a rags to riches story, and it works really well from a narrative standpoint. My biggest complaints about the game actually revolve around its lack of class balance. Certain classes are considered significantly better than others and either have overly difficult promotions or can't get the right master or grandmaster skills to help them keep up. A good example is how Thief is the only class that can reach Grandmaster Disarm Trap, and only Monk's Dark Path can reach Master, and we know how obnoxious that Cypher quest was without a guide. So most players have to include a thief or find alternate ways of dealing with trapped chests, which, while they do exist, can be a little bit annoying. They could have instead have given the lowly ranger Master Disarm Trap to give it more utility, which I don't think would have broken the class by any means. Another example is how Druid can only master all spell schools except for the fact that they can't even learn light or dark magic. I think it would have been more interesting if the Dark Path Druids could eventually grandmaster in elemental magic and Light Path Druids could grandmaster in self magic, since missing out on an entire spell school was already punishing enough as is. Despite all that, Might and Magic 7 having 9 separate classes as opposed to Might and Magic 6 only having 6 was still a huge step in the right direction, and one of the biggest reasons why I prefer creating parties in Might and Magic 7. The replayability there being, well, how does this team fare against the other ones I've made in the past? Luckily, Might and Magic still has a thriving modding community, and people do try their hand at balance patches, so little changes to classes or other quality of life are possible and do exist out there. What really makes me sad is that there's no true successor to these style of Might and Magic games. They're called free roam blobbers, and while there's definitely a few indie titles out there that are attempting to recapture this essence, they don't really get close enough, in my opinion, to those old games. I firmly believe that with better budgeting, maybe better ideas, and maybe attempting to push things a bit further, this series could have spawned its own genre in and of itself. But while its contemporaries such as System Shock went on to spawn the BioShock universe, or we have something like Planescape Torment having other similar identities like Icewind Dale, this style of Might and Magic game never managed to really stand out and therefore never spawned a popularized form of its own genre. Thank you so much if you're still watching. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. This is my YouTube debut, and I cannot express enough how appreciative I am if you made it all the way through this video. Feel free to give me any constructive feedback or tell me what you thought about Might and Magic 7. If you want to see more of the Might and Magic universe, we still have Might and Magic 6, 8, 9, and 10 to cover, and there's a bunch of quirky spin-offs. And if Might and Magic isn't your cup of tea, please comment down below about what might be, because there's plenty of other games I'm interested in and plenty of other games I want to cover. Thank you so much for watching. Please check the description below if you wish to join the community, and I'll catch you all later. Keep it retro.